Hey vecino, good morning. ¿Ya tienes tu cafecito? Pues siéntate. Tengo que preguntarte algo. Have you ever noticed how you can be in the middle of making a decision and before you ever even feel settled in it, your mind goes to, what are my parents going to think? And it's interesting because it's not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. Pero ahí está. All right, so grab that cafecito. Porque this is the Entre Mundos Podcast. It's a space for bicultural Latinos navigating life between cultures. Y aquí hablamos de cultura, identidad, mental health, family expectations, and what it means to honor your roots without losing yourself. Now, before we get deeper into today's conversation, I want to offer a quick reminder. Even though I work as a trauma-informed mental health counselor and nervous system educator, this podcast is not therapy. And it's not a replacement for therapy. This space is for reflection and conversation. Mejor think of it like sitting down with a vecino who understands both cultura y psychology. All right, ahora sí, let's talk. Let's go back to what we were talking about, porque this shows up in real life all the time. A veces es obvio, like when it comes to a career change. You're thinking about doing something different and you can already hear it. ¿Y eso te va a dar de comer? And sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it's boundaries, sometimes it's just you thinking differently than how you were raised. You entertain a thought and suddenly you start to feel like a punch in the gut, or maybe you start to feel tension in your neck. Y hasta a veces te da un dolorazo de cabeza. Now, let's slow this down for a moment, porque many people label this experience as fear, pero it's actually something more specific. What's actually happening here is something called shame, and that distinction matters. Guilt is the acknowledgement that you did something wrong. Guilt is actually a helpful emotion because it helps us rectify a wrong. Pero shame is paralyzing. Shame will often cause you to think thoughts like, there's something wrong with me. Y por muchos de nosotros, that's the feeling underneath all of this. Mira, vecino, let me help you understand shame. Shame is kind of like a dysfunctional cry for connection. It shows up because part of you is longing for closeness, still wanting approval, still wanting to feel seen and accepted by your parents. Pero a la misma vez, there's this internal belief that you're not fully worthy of that connection, especialmente when you aren't making choices that are aligned with your parents' expectation of you. Y lo que pasa es que now you're in this tension. Quieres conexión, pero you don't feel safe moving towards it. And what happens next is important, porque even though part of you wants that approval, and even though you can rationally explain why you deserve it, your nervous system shifts into protection. And for a lot of us, that protection looks like distancing, pulling back, avoiding the conversation, avoiding the disappointment altogether. Y lo que sucede es que avoiding disappointment feels more safe than being fully seen and accepted for who you are. And that's where people start losing themselves. También we have to layer culture on top of that, porque this isn't happening in a vacuum. For many of us as bicultural Latinos, we're navigating two very different systems at the same time. On one, tenemos nuestra cultura, which is deeply family-centered, connected, and involved. Parents are part of decisions. Family has a voice. And for many of us, we want la bendición de nuestros padres. That matters. And on the other side, we have the American way, which emphasizes independence, autonomy, and do what's best for you. And in that system, disagreement with your parents, even disappointing them, can feel a bit more normalized. And because we are physically here, we find ourselves holding both worldviews. Part of you wants connection and blessing, y otro parte de ti is being pushed towards independence. And that creates a very specific kind of tension, one that a lot of people don't fully understand unless they've lived it. For me, this showed up in a very real way. I was raised in a church that meant a lot to my family. And for a long time, I stayed connected to it, not just because of belief, but because of what it represented: family, identity, belonging. But over time, I started to notice something shifting. My values were changing. The way I saw things was evolving. And what was happening is that there was a values misalignment. My internal framework was shifting, but my external environment was still expecting consistency. And that tension was rough porque the struggle wasn't just about beliefs. The struggle became más como, what does this decision mean for my relationship with my parents? And if I'm being honest, I already knew. I knew that stepping away was going to disappoint them. Pienso que this is where a lot of people get stuck. No es porque you don't know who you are. Es porque you understand what it might cost to live in alignment with that. Mira, even growing up, my father had this vision. He wanted one of his sons to become a farmer. Y pobrecito mi papá, pero none of us did. And for a long time, I felt like I let him down. The struggle was real. I wanted to go to college. Y mi padre estaba aferrado que me quedara en el rancho. He was disappointed. But over time, the way that I view this struggle changed. Mira, esto es lo que pasa. Our parents dream in the language of what they know. Cuando la misma vez we're trying to build a life in the language of who we are. And those don't always align perfectly. Pero hay que reconocer que misalignment doesn't mean failure. It means something is evolving. So then the question becomes, what do we do with all of this? Because the goal isn't to stop caring. Caring about your family, that matters. But there's a difference between caring and abandoning yourself. Hay una diferencia. And the work is learning how to say, I love my family deeply, and I'm choosing a life that aligns with me. Both can exist if you let them. And this is important to really let sink in. Disappointing someone does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means that you're doing something different. And that's the space that we live in, Entre Mundos, between connection and individuality, between family and self, between honoring your roots and becoming who you're meant to be. It's not about choosing one and losing the other. It's about honoring your roots without losing yourself. All right, vecino, this one might have brought up some things. So if it did, just take a moment and take a breath. And maybe this is something you sit with this week. Esto no es algo that you just rush to fix. Instead of rushing, ask yourself, where in my life am I avoiding disappointment at the cost of being fully seen for who I am? Or what would it look like to stay connected to my family while still being honest about who I'm becoming? Because that's the real work, learning how to stay connected without losing yourself. So thanks again for sharing a cafecito with me. And if you know someone who might need to hear this conversation too, por favor, compártelo. Send them this episode, because these are the kinds of conversations many of us grew up feeling but rarely heard spoken out loud. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find me on Substack, TikTok, and Instagram under Entre Mundos Collective, where we explore culture, identity, and mental health from a bicultural perspective. And of course, don't forget to tell all your vecinos about your favorite bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. But until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your people, and keep honoring your roots without losing yourself. Un abrazote fuerte y hasta luego. Bye.